Mightier than Este is Nienna, sister of the Feanturi. She dwells alone. She is acquainted with grief and mourns for every wound that Arda has suffered in the marring of Melkor. Today, we narrate the life and story of Nienna, the Lady of Pity and Mourning. Like all the Ainur, Nienna first comes into existence before the beginning of time and the creation of the universe. She is brought into being by Eru Ilúvatar's thought in the timeless halls, his dwelling which exists outside the boundaries of Ea, the created universe, and she is one of the Valier, the queens of the Valar. Nienna has two brothers, Namo and Tirmo, or Mandos and Lorien, who are called the Feanturi, the masters of spirits, and she has no spouse, for she dwells alone. She is among the Aratar, the 8 High Ones of Arda, and the most powerful and revered of the Valar. Her name is Quenya, and it means she who weeps. Nienna participates in the music of the Ainur, the great song which results in the creation of the universe. Her role in the song is one of great sadness, and as her province is grief and mourning, through her, sorrow enters the world. So great was her sorrow as the music unfolded that her song turned to lamentation long before its end, and the sound of mourning was woven into the themes of the world before it began. But she does not weep for herself, and those who hearken to her learn pity and endurance in hope. Tolkien also writes of Nienna's role in the great music. For it is said that even in the music Nienna took little part, but listened intent to all that she heard. Therefore she was rich in memory and far-sighted, perceiving how the themes would unfold in the tale of Arda, but she had little mirth, and all her love was mingled with pity, grieving for the harms of the world, and for the things that failed of fulfillment. So great was her ruth, it is said, that she could not endure to the end of the music. Therefore she has not the hope of Manwë. He is more far-seeing, but pity is the heart of Nienna. Before long, the song comes to an end, and the world is brought into being. At the beginning of time, Nienna and many of the Valar descend into Ea, and they eventually discover Arda, the place where the children of Ilúvatar would awake. They descend upon it, and they begin to shape it according to their own will. But with them also descends Melkor, who endeavors to undo all their labors. He corrupts the world and taints it with his evil. In this way, Arda is marred, and death and sickness find themselves in every living thing. Nienna mourns for every wound that Arda suffers in the marring of Melkor. After countless years of war against him, the lands are changed, and Nienna and the Valar retreat to the uttermost west, where Valinor lies. In this land, each of the Valar creates and rules their own domain. The halls of Nienna lie at the westernmost border of the world, but she often visits the halls of her brother, Mandos. And there she comforts and counsels those who cry to her in the halls of awaiting, the place where the spirits of the elves are gathered to await their re-embodiment. Her halls are west of west, upon the borders of the world, and she comes seldom to the city of Valimar, where all is glad, she goes rather to the halls of Mandos, which are near to her own, and all those who wait in Mandos cry to her, for she brings strength to the spirit and turns sorrow to wisdom. The windows of her house look outward from the walls of the world. In an earlier writing in Morgoth's Ring, Tolkien writes of Nienna, "She dwells alone, pity is in her heart, and mourning and weeping come to her. Shadow is her realm, and her throne hidden, for her halls are west of west, nigh to the borders of the world and darkness, and she comes seldom to Valmar, the city of the gods, where all is glad. She goes rather to the halls of Mandos, which are nearer and yet more northward, and all those who go to Mandos cry to her, for she is a healer of hurts, and turns pain to medicine, and sorrow to wisdom. The windows of her house look outward from the walls of the world." After Valinor is full wrought, and the mansions of the Valar are established, Nienna and the Valar search for a way to bring light to their land. So she helps Yavanna και Mentari, the queen of the earth, with her labors in the creation of the two trees of Valinor, which will lie near Valmar, the city of the Valar, and will become the new source of light in the Undying Lands. Before its western gate there was a green mount, a Zelohar, that is named also Corollaire, and Yavanna hallowed it, and she sat there long upon the green grass, and sang a song of power, in which was set all her thought of things that grow in the earth. But Nienna thought in silence, and watered the mold with tears. Thereafter, the Valar rule Aman in bliss and prosperity for hundreds of the years of the trees, or thousands of our own years. In 1090 of the years of the trees, they decide to put an end to the evils of Melkor, and they storm Utumno, his fortress in Middle-earth. And upon doing so, they manage to capture him. He is then brought back to Valinor, and he is cast into the halls of Mandos for 3 ages of the Valar, almost 3,000 of our own years. During that period, Miriel, the queen of the Noldor, passes away after giving birth to Feanor. King Finwë, Miriel's spouse and Feanor's father, is left without a wife. Thus he comes to the Valar and calls for their wisdom and counsel. Nienna's compassion and mercy are clearly seen when she continually supports that Finwë should be allowed to remarry after the death of his wife, which is against the designs of Eru Ilúvatar. Then Nienna spoke, who came to Valmar seldom, but sat now upon the left hand of Manwë.
In the use of justice there must be pity, which is the consideration of the singleness of each that cometh under justice. Which of you, Valar, in your wisdom, will blame these children, Finwë and Miriel? For the children are both strong and without might. Mandos you hold to be the strongest of all that are in Arda, being the least moved, and therefore you have dared to commit even the Mare himself to his keeping. Yet I say to you that each Fea of the children is as strong as he, for it hath the strength of its singleness impregnable, which cometh to it from Eru, as to us. In its nakedness it is obdurate beyond all power, that ye have to move it, if it will not. Yet the children are not mighty. In life they are little, and can effect little, and they are young, and they know time only. Their minds are as the hands of their babes, little in grasp, and even that grasp is yet unfilled. How shall they perceive the end of deeds, or forego the desires which arise from their very nature, the indwelling of the spirit in the body, which is the right condition? Have ye known the weariness of Miriel, or felt the bereavement of Finwë? Miriel, I deem, died by necessity of body, in suffering for which he was blameless, or indeed to be praised, and yet was not given power to resist it, the cost of so great a childbearing. And herein I think that Aule perceiveth a part of the truth. The severance of the Fea was in Miriel a thing special. Death is indeed death, and within the great theme cometh from the matter, and is grievous. But Eru, in this death, had a purpose of immediate good, and it need not have borne any bitter fruit, whereas death that comes from the matter only is intended for evil, and its healing must await in hope only, even until the end. But Finwë, not understanding death, asked how should he, called Miriel, and she did not return, and he was bereaved, and his natural life and expectation was impaired. Justly he cried, "Is there not healing in Aman?" That cry could not be unheeded, and what could be done we have done. Wherefore should this be grudged?
In the end, the Valar conclude that Finwë should be allowed to remarry, which would be permitted by a new ruling they decree, called the Statute of Finwë and Miriel. The noontide of Valinor comes to an end when Melkor completes the term of his bondage and is brought before the thrones of the Valar. There he asks for their pardon, and here the pity of Nienna is again plainly seen. Though she always mourns for the destruction Melkor has wrought and the marring he has brought to Arda, she stands in favor of his release. Before the gates of Valmar, Melkor abased himself at the feet of Manwë and sued for pardon, vowing that if he might be made only the least of the free people of Valinor, he would aid the Valar in all their works, and most of all, in the healing of the many hurts that he had done to the world, and Nienna aided his prayer. In 1495 of the Years of the Trees, after Melkor has been set free and has roamed Aman for 95 years, almost 1,000 of our own years, turmoil befalls the hallowed land of the Valar. Ungoliant, an evil spirit, and Melkor destroy the two trees of Valinor. Then Nienna comes forth, and with her tears she cleanses the contaminated trees of the evil of Ungoliant. But after a while Nienna rose, and she went up onto the mount, and she cast back her grey hood, and her eyes shone like stars in the rain, for her tears were poured out, and she washed away the defilements of Ungoliant, and when she had wept, she sank slowly, mourning for the bitterness of the world, and all hurts of the marring of Arda. 5 years of the trees pass, and Nienna and the other Valar arise and begin to set forth in deeds those counsels which they had taken for the rectification of the evils of Melkor. Then Manwë bade Yavanna and Nienna to put forth all their powers of growth and healing, and they put forth all their powers upon the trees. But the tears of Nienna availed not to heal their mortal wounds, and for a long while Yavanna sank alone in the shadows. Yet even as hope failed and her song faltered, Telperion bore at last upon a leafless bough one great flower of silver, and Laurelin a single fruit of gold. These remains of the two trees are carried in the sky in two vessels and ultimately become the sun and the moon. During Nienna's stay in Aman, some of the Maiar become affiliated to her and seek for her teachings. It is worth noting that in one of Tolkien's writings, Pallando, one of the two blue wizards that are sent to Middle-earth as Istari, does not serve under the Vala Orome, but under Nienna and Mandos. There are here also some rough tables relating the names of the Istari to the names of the Valar, Olorin to Manwë and Varda, Curumo to Aule, Aiwendil to Yavanna, Alatar to Orome, and Pallando also to Orome, but this replaces Pallando to Mandos and Nienna. The most notable and important of her students is the Maya Olorin, who often seeks her for her wisdom. Wisest of the Maiar was Olorin. He too dwelt in Lorien, but his ways took him often to the house of Nienna, and of her he learned pity and patience. Olorin is the Maya who in the third age travels to Middle-earth as Gandalf, and is instrumental in bringing about the demise of Sauron, the second Dark Lord. So Nienna's ideals and teachings of pity, mercy and compassion will impact the entire history of Middle-earth and will play a vital role in the unfolding of its events, reaching even to the Third Age through Gandalf the Wizard, her student, and all those that he in turn will influence. From Bilbo sparing Gollum's life, to Sam acting likewise, to Faramir following Gandalf's example of humility, and most of all to Gandalf's choice of trusting and valuing the little folk, the hobbits. Finally, Gandalf expresses Nienna's teachings after the destruction of the One Ring, before the ring-bearers depart from the Grey Havens, when he emphasizes the purity of tears. I will not say do not weep, for not all tears are an evil. Through the Lady of Pity and Mourning, Gandalf learns all that is needed to bring about the destruction of Sauron through pity and mercy. He, who is Frodo, was honored because he had accepted the burden voluntarily and had then done all that was within his utmost physical and mental strength to do. He and the cause were saved by mercy, by the supreme value and efficacy of pity and forgiveness of injury. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one on Mae Govanen. Namarie.